Hello and welcome to Marketing Dividends, presented by the Australian Association of National Advertisers, where Australia's leading advertisers reveal how they tackle today's business challenges. I'm here with James Hier. He's CEO of MEC, to discuss innovation, the pressure for short-term growth, and the value of risk, with today's guests, Vittoria Shortt, Group Executive, Marketing and Strategy at the Commonwealth Bank, and also David Scribner. He's Head of Virgin Mobile Australia. Welcome to the program. Very glad to have you with us. James, perhaps I'll start with you, because we're so focused when it comes to the market on short-term returns. We want to see quarterly results. Is that sort of the nemesis of innovation?
So Larry Fink would probably agree with you. Blackstone, he wrote to S&P 500 companies and talked about the hysteria of consistent quarterly returns that the stock market expects. Obviously, the stock market tries to bake in the future growth potential of each company. And I think there is something with the dichotomy between what they're wanting to see in terms of consistent quarterly returns and the need for innovation. And David, I don't know if you have any perspective on that.
Yeah, look, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, results and innovation. We all have a scorecard that we have to adhere to and try to achieve. And it's not innovation for innovation's sake. Innovation needs to move the needle.
I'd really agree with that, actually. I think you have to invest for the long term to be around in the long term, and innovation plays a key part in the long term. But you also need to innovate for the short term too. So continuing to innovate in the short term is very important as well.
I mean, you talk about long term, but markets are impatient. And I don't see too many companies being probably as patient as someone like Nestle with Nespresso. 10 years of red ink. What's the shelf life of how long your company boards will allow an innovation to go?
Well, I think, James, I mean, innovation has to be on the board agenda. It has to be part of a growth, because companies have to be there for the long term. They have to be trying to be there for the long term. But there has to be two sides to that story. One that is making sure you get the results, and one that there is adequate investment for that future orientation.
We talk about innovation almost as if it's a given in the boardroom. What are the sort of main inhibitors to getting that innovation agenda forward? Do you find that, you know, it's still perhaps a discussion, a contested discussion in some cases?
I see it less as a contested discussion. In fact, in our organisation, we do see it as fundamental and necessary. And it's a really important part of bringing new experiences for the customer as well. So thinking about things differently and delivering in a different and more unique way. So we think it's fundamental. Your question around what inhibits or what makes it hard to do sometimes, I think to be innovative, you need to really encourage and foster a culture of innovation. And to do that, you need to encourage everyone in your organisation. I don't think it's the purvey of a few. So I think that's a really important part to really help the innovation agenda.
Just in terms of, is an innovation really only as good as its owner? And I say that, and if I look at something like Woolworths and Masters divesting in what would have seemed a great bet, because there are duopolies everywhere in Australia, what happens when the visionary walks away from their innovation?
I think there's definite buy-in to an innovation across an organisation. Execution is just as much, or possibly more important than the idea itself. And without that investment across the execution of the idea plus the idea itself, then they'll tend to fail. So I think that really it's trying to get the buy-in of the whole organisation behind the innovation.
I think that Masters is a good example to speak of, because it's widely talked about in the marketplace as a huge failure. So as a marketer, as somebody who's interested in innovation, do you also look at your competitors' failures as much as their successes?
Absolutely. I think in any industry, and particularly in the telco industry, we try to look at all the innovations that have been done and what's happened to them and what can we learn from that innovation. And sometimes it may be a tweak around the execution, or a tweak around the pricing, or a tweak around the kind of product that was launched in the market. Could have been a timing issue even. And if you don't learn from that, then you're sort of failing around the whole idea of trying to get innovation based on a platform of ideas.
Yeah, I think to add to that and use some of our own specific examples, we have the best intentions around innovations and we put a lot of thought and effort, market research into them. And then when they get to market, you don't know with certainty what's going to happen. I think the most important part is to, as David was saying, find out about the bits that are working and the bits that are not and why. We had an example where we put an app to market called Kaching. Some aspects of Kaching were amazing and had very quick and rapid wide-scale adoption, and some aspects didn't. So the simple learning for us was take the pieces that worked very well and put them into our main app experience and not the pieces that didn't. So it's all about learning, pivoting, taking what works and keeping on pursuing the innovation agenda.
And I would also say about that as well, but building on that, learning from people's innovation, whether something that hasn't worked or whether it's worked, is also not just looking at old rivals, but looking at other industries and verticals and understanding what they're doing and what you can learn. We often look at the banking industry from a telco perspective to see what they're doing around innovation and whether it can be applied to us.
So what you're saying is we can't research away risk. It's interesting, The Economist a couple of weeks ago looked at investment in R&D as a percentage of GDP, ranked all the countries, number one, South Korea, and it correlates really nicely with the number of patents each of those countries are able to introduce. Now, do you see a correlation between the investment you put into R&D in your company and the number of innovations coming out?
I might pick up first on the OECD work. We were interested in that, and so we did a bit of our own analysis in the Australian context. And what we found was, rather than patents, we looked at trademarks. But there is absolutely a correlation between trademarks in Australia and GDP. So it holds true here. I would then say that rather than think about R&D and R&D teams, we're really thinking about how we develop right across the business. I think it's everyone's job rather than the job of a few. And I also think that, there's a real spectrum of innovation from the small things through to the groundbreaking things. It's not just about patents and trademarks. It's also about the accumulation of small iterations that can sometimes make the difference.
Small iterations, so what's the line between something's an innovation and it starts turning to it's just actually an improvement?
Yeah, I think we can get carried away with words, and rather than try and define what is and what isn't, I think if you're really trying to foster a culture of innovation, then accepting improvements as innovations, no matter how big or small, I think is an important part of the cultural piece.
Absolutely. I mean, I think improvement is just as good as innovation. If it moves the business forward in a positive way, then that should be celebrated. So for us, it was about getting paper out of our stores and doing that. It wouldn't be the first innovation. It's not something that's going to win an innovation prize, but it made a massive difference to customers' lives and our field force.
Vittoria, CommBank has an innovation lab.
Yes.
So how closely was the marketing department, instrumental in getting that off the ground? What's the role in there?
Yeah, so we have an innovation lab, and we have pop-up labs as well that go around the country, and also innovation labs in some of our other locations offshore, like Hong Kong and London. And the purpose of the lab is really a place where we bring together tools and techniques for teams right across the whole of the organisation. And increasingly, we work with our customers in the innovation lab to really solve business problems in a different way. So we would use different tools like customer-centred design and design thinking and agile development and a number of other tools to really try and crack problems in a different and more innovative way. So that's the way we use our innovation lab. We've seen some terrific things come out of there.
So if you double the investment in that lab, does that mean I can expect to see double the amount of innovation?
So we could have 20 times the innovative ideas, but I think organisations also have natural limits. You can only do so much change in any one organisation at any one time. And customers as well, I think, if we were to change our online experience every single day, I think that would start to become kind of frustrating. So there are natural limits to change at a customer level, but also in an organisation.
David, does the type of brand that you are change your view of the world in terms of innovation? Virgin's a challenger brand.
Absolutely. So I'm going to say absolutely, right? And I've said it twice. Innovation is at the core of what we do, but I luckily and fortunately work for a fabulous brand that goes across a number of verticals, and we're launching cruise ships out of Miami at the moment, so you can think about the innovation that has to happen on a massive scale. For that, we're building those cruise ships. So innovation has to go across everything that we do. I think the one thing that is really critical that Vittoria just said, and I'd like to support, is it has to be centred around the customer. It has to be, how do we move that customer's experience into a better place that's better for the company? And I think that's where innovation can really sing, and I think Virgin and Richard has done that for 40 years now.
I guess one of the things about the world that we live in right now is that you get very rapid feedback to innovation. Talking about your app earlier on, pretty quickly if it's resonating, don't you?
Very quickly. I think that's the power of having the kind of world that we're in, and that instantaneous feedback from customers. I would caution that sometimes you need to get a balanced view on something that's working, and that if you launch something, it's not the first two replies, whether positive or negative, that you should react to. It needs to be a real understanding of what's the impact on the market once you've launched it.
Yeah, I'd add to that point there. It's sometimes it'll be the marketer's job to help communicate some of these capabilities more clearly. You might find when you release something to market, it might get quite a lot of organic take-up. But sometimes you actually need to do the job of explaining the feature, how to use it, and that really helps. So I think that's where marketing can play a really key role in helping educate around features.
In terms of inspiration for this type of innovation, there's a lot of what people are calling Silicon Valley tourism, where entire boards or groups of marketers wander and go and visit Facebook, Google, et al. Where do you see the value in that?
Look, I think that there's a couple of things to that. We are all very busy. I'm not saying anything new. So having a trip away gives you space. But what I would then say that it needs to go with a team, whereas that team is cross verticals, and you've got people that are a part of the execution, people that are part of the idea, so that if you actually get something, you can come back and start to put that into the business and start to make a difference. So the one person going off and then becoming an evangelist coming back is probably not the ideal way to use these trips.
I think it's a really important point, David. I think taking teams away and experiencing innovations together helps with execution. So it's all very well having a great idea, but if you can't execute it, then that becomes the problem. So I think that's a very important point.
I think there's a great line. So losing the signal has just been written about the history of BlackBerry. And the last line in the book actually says innovation has no finish line. I think that's really captures the spirit that basically you have to keep going. There is no let up, and the moment that you do, you're going to drop the ball.
And I think if you think of those people that are great innovators, they've never hit a finishing line. No. They've just kept innovating. And that's what drives them, and that's what's fantastic, and great companies do that.
There's always something to solve for the customers too, so I think that's probably why it never finishes.
Well, cheers to innovation and cheers to the hard work ahead. David, Vittoria, James as well. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
So thanks to our guests for joining us today. That was James Hier. He's the CEO of MEC, Vittoria Shortt. She's Group Executive of Marketing and Strategy at the Commonwealth Bank, and David Scribner, who's Head of Virgin Mobile Australia. That is Marketing Dividends for this week. We'll be back with more business coverage in just a moment.